He actually nearly beat me. I only beat him by a couple of points in the fifth round, but he was so upset he got his dad to go and buy him a Bane blade.
No. It's definitely playable.
Yeah.
And I mean, I came third in a tournament.
Yes,
because of
in a proper RTT.
RTT. And I was just like, you know what? I was like, I think I was more, I'm going to prove them wrong kind of thing. And again, seeing the people's face drain when I go, oh, that's 6 damage.
6 damage,
and they're like, oh, D6? I'm like, no. 6 damage, please. Yeah, flat 6. And they're like, oh, God. Hi everyone and welcome to Warhammer. We're your hosts Jack
and Dan.
Today we're going to be looking at how can you build a very good Warhammer 40k list.
Yeah, and please tell me because I need help.
Yeah, please give me all your help. Yes, so basically I think we'll start off with a couple of free tools that's available because although you need to build a good list, you also need to, I guess, know how to, and there's some really good apps that's out there that kind of help along the way.
Yes. So, which ones would you recommend?
I recommend. That's a hard one because although I dislike the Warhammer 40k app,
for ethical reasons.
Yes, I feel like they've got a very good app to basically get you started, and it's one free that you can use per list.
Yes. So the UX is pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah, just makes it super easy to kind of choose your army, export it. It's now got that really nice new feature where you can see what stratagems and abilities your army has as well. So I really like that. So that's my peak of the peak for the time being. The next one is Battle Scribe, because that's just, again, it's another free one that I always enjoy.
Yes.
Got me through ninth.
In ninth, I was just about to say the same thing. Yeah, in ninth, it was an absolute godsend. It was brilliant.
It was very nice. And then after that, I've got the Waterpedia in a bit of pen and paper, basically, because Waterpedia is free at the end of the day.
Yes, all the info's on Waterpedia, but you can't build a list in the same way as you can on the Battle Scribe and 40k app. Is that right?
Exactly. It's literally just like, here's a bunch of information, crack on and basically get it done. The last one is a codex. You do need your codex at the end of the day.
I do like my codex, yes.
Yeah, but that one is 30 quid or 30 smackaroos. So you would need to fork out money for that. And if you want them to play multiple different armies, I'd probably recommend just going down one of the routes of like the free app or something like that, because buying a codex for each army that you might play, it can add up in price wise.
Yeah, it is expensive, you're right. Yeah. And if you're listening GW, we talked about this before, but just make them all digital and a $5 each or something. We'll all buy them.
Everyone will buy them.
We'll sell more. Yeah.
And people will still buy the books as well, because everyone likes them. Everyone likes having a physical copy in front of them.
Yeah, I think so. And particularly as an older man like me, I think I am transitioning from the physical copy. I like it on the shelf, and so it's nice to like get out and have for reference and that. But during a game, having it all on your phone is what you want. Really,
it's so much easier.
So it's there, and the data cards obviously help as well.
It certainly is.
So why though is list writing important? How is this a big factor in success in 40k for you?
What, like building the app?
Building like list creation. Like, is it like, obviously you've got list creation, you've got deployment, and then you've got how you play the game. Basically, the three elements, I think, in terms of success, if you want to be competitive. But writing a list, you can win or lose a game on a good list or a bad list, can't you?
That's true. That is true. Yeah, you do need to pick I guess for me, it's like you do need to kind of think about what you want to achieve before you go into the game. Like if you're going there to have fun, I played a game the other week where I was playing loads of Catans. Yes. I went in there to have fun. I didn't think about, I need to capture objectives, I need to do secondaries. I was there just to kill.
Right.
So I just picked the biggest units that were there to play in.
Yes.
And I had very much fun.
Rule of cool. There's nothing wrong with that, is there?
No, not at all. And I guess apart from that, are you there to score points? Then that's where you maybe want to listen into this episode, because we are going to be diving into what units to pick, depending on how many points they cost, what are they used for, and all that sort of jazz. So
good.
Yeah. But do you want to just dive straight into the actual core points that we've maybe raised?
You also made a very good point in terms of the pre stuff. Really, is like you need to research your army, don't you?
Yes, yeah. It's always good to know what your army does and does well before you actually start building a list there. Yeah.
And I think another point you mentioned off camera, which I think is brilliant, is talking to other players. Like, there's always somebody that's got more experience than you, isn't there?
Absolutely. I mean, I remember being at tournaments before where I've built what I thought was a very good list.
Yeah.
And then you get there and it's trash.
Yeah.
And then you see another Necron player, just go chat to them.
Yeah.
Just go have a little talk with them and see.
Why have you got that in there?
Exactly. Yeah. What's this unit for? What's its purpose?
Yeah.
What do you intend to use it for? And I remember someone mentioned, this is where I got my idea from, was to bring the Locust Destroyers. And I was like, well, why do you have one of them for?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, it's the cheapest unit. It's 30 points.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right. And he goes, engage on all fronts, behind enemy lines, deploy teleport homers, just that sort of stuff just adds up. For the 30 points, you're scoring well into a lot of points.
Yeah, 30 points, and if he dies, he dies.
Oh, yeah.
It's very true.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I think that's all of those steps are important in terms of having the right tools at your disposal, and then doing a little bit of research really pays off. In terms of if you're thinking about competitive lists, I think you need the right mix of units to ensure that you're competitive.
Yes,
and I think there's I've got 6 points here. That the first one is points efficiency.
Yeah,
primary mission you need to think about, killing power. Yep. Secondary objectives, your detachment choice if you've got one, and then obviously I think we can cover some slightly more advanced tips. Not saying I'm the best competitive player in the world, but just what we're doing here is talking you through our journey so far, I guess, and what we've learned along the way, isn't it?
Always, definitely.
So points efficiency wise. This is an interesting one, which took me a while to grasp, because you will hear this word a lot, like this unit is very efficient if you're watching competitive podcasts or listening to competitive podcasts or watching battle reports from Vanguard Tactics. And I was like, what do they mean by that? But what they really mean is 40k is largely balanced now, faction on faction. In fact, you could argue it's the most balanced it's ever been.
It's looking really good on the meta watch.
But each faction is not internally balanced. So what I mean by that is you've got points per model costs.
Yeah.
And some units are definitely overcosted on points per model. Some are undercosted sometimes. And for example, you don't see many competitive lists running Necron Warriors, Necron lists, because they're 10 points a model. I think they are now, but they're still slightly overcosted. They don't do enough for those points.
I would say the same thing. So for those points, that, I mean, again, 10 of them, 100 points, like, what are they there for? Is kind of my question. 100 blobs, are they there just to sit on the backfield objective? That might not be too bad if you're just to sit on the back line, because the shooting wise, it's okay.
It's okay.
It's not bad. I mean, OC 2 each, so that's 20 OC on your HQ, so already looking pretty handsome. But fundamentally, they don't do much anywhere else.
No,
is the big issue.
That's the thing. Yeah, I mean, it feels like in game they're designed to be ran in blobs of 20, and they're meant to march up the board and hold the mid board. They're like one of the iconic Necron units, the Undying Legions, but they just don't do that, do they?
Nah, exactly. And I mean, there's not very many things now that combo well with them, because they've got away the Reanimator that used to bring back more like D3 more.
Yeah, and their own reanimation got nerfed, didn't it?
It did. It used to be D3, or if you weren't on an objective, it was D3 plus 3.
Plus 3, yeah.
Which was obviously, that's really good, especially if you're holding back your backfield objective. Yeah. You'd be getting peppered from their end. Yeah. But then you're keeping your guys will be coming back, like potentially 6 coming back. Yeah. Which is unreal.
Or then if you're with the reanimated, D3 plus 3 plus D3.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that sounds good, but with them now, there's not much to it. And if you are going to be running a blob, well, if you run down the math, you're at least going to run a blob of 20. So that's 200 points. You're going to want some sort of Technomancer in there to reanimate more, or to protect more, give them the, I guess, additional benefits. Yeah,
you want some kind of cryptech, don't you? So some people like the Chronomancer because it gives them move, shoot, move. Some people like the Technomancer for feel no pain and stuff like that. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's about 60 points.
Yeah.
And then after that, you might want to throw in like an Overlord. Yeah. Which again, 85 points. So already you're looking at 350 plus.
And that's, if my maths is right, that's about the same as 10 Terminators roughly, give or take 50 points.
So then it's like, right, well, I've built this big blob of 20 warriors, 1 Overlord, Technomancer. What's its use? Yeah. Is it going to run up and try and secure the board?
It's not going to have the same impact on the game as 10 Terminators, is it? Just isn't.
Exactly. No, not at all. Then for half those points, you can get 6 destroyers, which just absolutely obliterate anything. So it's just not great. And if they get tied up in combat, well, those warriors are probably going to die against Terminators. And against the majority of big things. Yeah. So not very good.
Yeah. And you get, as you said here, you get a feeling game if a unit gets its points back. And it's worth, it is, as you said, it's worth, again, you're talking about asking people about lists. It's worth asking about individual units on some of these faction forums, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, just get your knowledge about them, know what they're good at, know what they're bad at as well. And I think that's really actually key as well, knowing what they're good and bad at when it comes to points efficiency.
Yeah.
And one thing I was going to say as well, whenever I pick lists or pick units specifically, I always ask myself, well, what is the purpose of this unit?
Yes.
Because sometimes there might be a unit in your army which is really a lot of, I guess, a large sum of points, but does it fit the purpose of what you need it to do?
Yeah.
Might justify those extra points that you need to bring. Like, I mean, a Catan, that's well-rounded, really good. It's really, it'll punch and kill a lot of things.
It's durable, it's got damage output,
Yeah.
can hold an objective.
But then we've just discussed briefly there about the Reanimator. Reanimator's not that great when it comes to Warrior Blobs. But for 70 points, 75 points?
75, I think, yeah.
What if it stayed back and started to heal your shooting army?
Yeah.
What if it hid? I discussed it on the unit review that we done last time.
That's right, yeah.
If it was hiding and it couldn't be killed, but it was around a blob of Doomsday Ark,
Doomstalkers,
Locust Lords, Locust Destroyers, they're reviving quite a lot of units and
keeping that gun line alive. Yeah, it's worth it.
As long as you basically, because again, since that can reanimate wounds, you might want to use it efficiently to then bring back and I guess get a net profit on how many points it's brought back compared to how much it's costed.
That's exactly it. So if you think about, let's say a Doomstalker's got 12 wounds and it's 130 points or something, you say it's about 10 points per wound, isn't it?
Yeah.
So if you can, which is basically the same as a Necron Warrior, but if you need to then bring back 8 wounds worth with your Canoptic Reanimator and it's paid for itself.
It has, yeah. And that's only one unit. Again, if it's around 3 or 4 units, it's getting loads of stuff back. In 1 or 2 turns, you could have its points refunded.
That would be well worth it. You're right.
So it's all about just kind of finding that. I think that if the points are too much, well, what's its purpose? Does it have a purpose? No. Probably best not to bring it.
And I think that leads us on to, in terms of purpose, that's divided into a few different segments. Primary mission is obviously important.
The biggest one. Yeah.
Yeah. So in all competitive games, if you're playing the Leviathan mission deck, in all games, you need to hold objectives to score points.
Yeah, just flat out.
Yeah. And you also need to deny your opponent from holding those objectives, which is important.
Denying is probably a really important one, which will probably come into the killing list.
Yes.
We'll talk about later.
Yes.
But yeah, for now, it's all about. And I think the points that you raised in here are actually spot on. That's kind of what goes through my head as well.
Right, good. So yeah, those are to score objectives. You need units that can move on to them. Still be there in your next command phase because that's when you score the points. Obviously, or usually is, isn't it? So they need, I think, 2 out of 3 of these traits, which is they need resilience, so they're hard to kill. They need numbers, so enough bodies to hang on if they're attacked.
Yeah.
And they need, you need high OC. It's objective control. So battle line units have OC2, and then obviously some monsters like Catan you were talking about, or 5, vehicles, they have good OC as well sometimes, don't they?
They do.
So if ideally you can get all 3 of those, you're laughing. But if you can only get 2 of the 3, I think that's usually enough to make it a designated primary mission unit.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think just getting it once you're on the objective, as long as you meet 2 of those, then you're pretty good. I would personally say the 2 best ones is resilience and numbers.
Yes.
You want to be tough enough to not be shifted. And then you also want, if you do get shifted, well, you want a lot of numbers to then be able to either come back or just still hold down the objective.
Yes. So that's the joy of those battle line units is like you were sort of talking about Necron Warriors. I know we've just dissed them, but because they've got that OC2, if a unit of 10, if you've got 15 of those 20 warriors are on the objective, that's 30 OC on there.
Exactly. If
your opponent brings 10 charges you with 10 Terminators, that's 10 OC.
Yeah.
So he's got to kill a lot of those warriors before he can hold that objective.
Exactly. With their reanimation that's coming back as well.
Yes.
They're going to be coming back to kind of do it again, tie them with maybe a Technomancer who heals them again.
Yeah.
You'll be getting a lot more. So it's finding the right combo, and I think just finding the right balance, I'd say, between
very much so. Absolutely, balance is a massive thing about this. And I think another thing to think about is sticky objectives. What I mean by this is there's some units that they can sit on an objective, and then if you hold it in your command phase, they can move off it, and it stays as your objective until your opponent moves onto it and takes it off you.
Yeah.
But that can be a very powerful tool as well, because it means then you can you're not out in the open. A lot of the time on objectives you are visible to your opponent, aren't you? They can get you.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
Or or you're vulnerable to a charge or whatever. So if you can go and sticky that objective, and then you can that unit can then go and move off and do something else, or hide or whatever, and just gives you a stronger chance of holding it. I think for a bit longer.
I think hiding is probably the better way of doing it, because you can like jump on, score it, move off it, and you're just enough off the objective that your opponent can't charge off it to get you. But you're in range to move forward and then charge them back on the objective to get a bigger punch back in there.
Yeah,
I think that's a really nice one to do. For me, one of the other ones I was going to mention was, if you don't have resilience, you don't have high OC, numbers is something that's actually a really good shout. Because if you've got enough numbers, again, maybe like, I don't know, not Terminators, Tyranids, swarm list kind of thing.
Yeah.
If you swarm onto an objective and you've got so many models that it kind of overshoots the objective.
Your opponent physically can't get on it.
So let's say you've got 20 guns, and then they will get absolutely destroyed. But if you remove the ones from the back first opposed to the front, which means that yes, they are going to kill them, but they're not going to kill them this turn, and they're not going to get onto.
They're not going to get on it this turn. That's a very good point.
You could in theory keep them off for 3 turns if you charge them. They charge you. You survive, and then they can't get on it. Next turn they kill you, but then they can't get onto the objective, and then 4th, 5th turn they're on it.
Yes.
So yes, 4th and 5th is theirs, but 1 to 3.
It's about taking it and holding it just for long enough to score. You score the points and they don't, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Another good way of people do that as well, though, is not so much with numbers, but with, again, the resilience side of things. I know I see a lot of Orc players and sometimes some Imperial Guard players where they charge their trucks forward and then turn them sideways.
Move blocking, yeah.
So they just move, basically block them in, push out all the orcs onto the objective, but the truck is like a screen. So basically they either can't get around the truck, or they've got to get through the truck. And obviously trucks are only like 75 points for orcs, which is, I still think that's crazy. But
it's good value.
It's good value.
That's an efficient unit.
Yeah, exactly. So basically doing that and then just kind of having that like blow, because then orcs are really good at the counter charge.
Yes.
So again, they could, I guess, like we'll do that little funny thing where they line them up straight back to an objective. So there's like a big line from one objective all the way to the front of the way. So basically just like they're on objective but also in combat.
Yes.
It's really good.
Yeah, you can string them out, yes.
Yeah. So I think just comboing it is really good, making sure that you've got like some good units that are going to, for me, again, Necrons, revive your warriors back on there to keep the objective. And then secondly, just making sure you screen the units out to not come out.
Yeah, I love that idea of screening and move blocking. I think that's something that I need to get better at for sure. And then as well as obviously primary mission, another thing I think is important is killing power. I mean, it is a war game and it's much easier to win if your opponent hasn't got
nothing left.
Yeah, you can't score any points. Yeah,
don't want them back. Yes, killing power is really good.
Yeah. And I think some missions like Purge the Foe, actually they will give you primary points for killing enemy units, don't they? So
exactly.
So it's definitely worth having some units in there whose sole purpose is just to delete,
just to kill.
Yeah,
just to purely kill. And I think it's hard though as well, because with 40k, especially in a tournament scene, there's so many different, I guess, armies that you're going to verse that are good at different things. You have to really worry about you have to really focus on making sure you've got enough killing power across the board. So you could bring, when we say killing power, people might instantly think, oh, I need to bring tanks, I need to bring heavy weapons.
Yeah.
But you need, what if you're going to be killing tanks, but then you forget that they've got loads of chaff, like Imperial Guard or Tyranids might have loads of swarm lists.
Yeah.
If you've just got big guns that roll only 2 dice per turn, you're going to be buggered against bugs.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, but it's true though. I think from if you look at Drukhari, for example, the Dark Eldar, Dark Lance spam was the way to play them when their index came out, which is a lot, like you say, a lot of single shot, high AP, high damage weapons. Yeah. But if you're facing a swarm list, you need anti-infantry in there as well, which Dark Eldar can give you from splinter rifles and splinter cannons.
Really good.
So you need to think about ways you balance that. It's a really good point, because you need things to take out the big. You definitely need your, and what we would typically call anti-tank, like your high AP, high damage. Yeah. But you also definitely need some more to kind of sweep and clear, particularly for those objectives. Yeah. It's a very good point.
And it's sometimes it's hard though as well, because then there's armies like knights that are just all vehicles. So you might bring half and half, where you might bring half anti-tank or half chaff, and then you verse all knights, and you're like, well, half of my army will not touch these
I'm
knights
going to
at
be
all.
wounding you on 6s.
Yeah. And then it's then like, okay, right, well, now it's like you're kind of going through your mind of like, okay, right, now that I've brought this chaff, what is this chaff's unit's purpose?
Yes.
Their purpose originally was to, right, they're going to just sweep up any weak units.
Yeah.
Now there's none. Right, the only logical thing that they can now do is just score points.
Yeah.
Get them in their positions, move them to the right areas. I mean, the one that I absolutely hate, which I think everyone will probably agree with, is the four corners.
Engage on all front.
No.
Or investigate signals.
Hate that one. You got to be within 9 inches of each corner.
Yeah.
Awful. But if you've got units that aren't going to be actually doing anything, just
use them for that.
Move them for that. Because again, as you mentioned, there's going to be engage on all fronts. There's going to be deploy Talbot homers, which will be in your opponent's backline.
Yes.
Obviously investigate signals. So already that's 15 points, and there's going to be a lot more points out there to score if you're in all 4 corners.
Yes.
So just moving them and keeping them safe, no harm doing that at all.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And sometimes you can just throw a unit at a knight just to tie it up for a turn. But with big guns now, I mean, they can shoot out of combat now anyway. So obviously they get a -1, but it's hard to deal with knights if you've got a lot of chaff.
Yeah.
But in terms of those objectives you mentioned, that brings us very neatly onto that. Secondary objectives is obviously something that's very important when you're building your list.
It is. Yeah.
And there's 2 elements to this. That most people still play tactical, which is obviously drawing 2 like random cards each turn.
Yeah.
Then you need, if you think, then there's no harm in getting that deck out in front of you, going through it when you're building the list and thinking, right, have I got a unit that can do this? How am I going to achieve this?
Yeah.
Some of the units that we've described above in points, the points above will help with that. So, for example, storm hostile objective, defend stronghold, capture enemy outpost. They all require objective holding units, which we just talked about. Some of the cards, such as overwhelming force, assassination, bring it down, they're all killing power, which we just talked about. So some of those things are innately built in. But the other thing I would think about, mention, which you just touched on slightly as well, is that a lot of the cards require movement in this edition.
Yeah, really are.
Yeah, so make sure you've got some fast units or units with deep strike, or keep things plan to keep things in strategic reserve.
Yeah,
like you said, if you're playing like against knights, or even if you're not playing against knights, you need to be thinking about how am I going to achieve investigate signals if that comes up.
Yeah,
do I want the points?
Now you might even have to going slightly away from what we've kind of written down there, but you might even have a list that is purely just for tanks. And if you come across a list that is all knights or is all tanks, you might think, actually, I'm not going to pick the tactical
cards.
I might pick fixed on the secondary objectives, and you might want to pick bring it down, or assassination and such, because then you'll be like, all right, cool, I know I'm going to be basically killing a lot of these units, and I know I can't get around the board very well, so instead I'm just going to focus heavily on killing this particular unit.
Yeah, if you were like, for example, a Tau player and you were playing against knights, you're a gunline army, you kind of sitting largely in the back third of the table, and your aim is to, like you said, if you want to score, bring it down and assassinate, you're going to reliably score your secondaries, aren't you?
100%. Yeah, for me, like I say, you briefly mentioned it before, but movement, I've said it so many times, but movement is key in 10th edition. You need to get around the board, and because I think just personally, I just prefer tactical. I feel like it makes us think more, and it makes us play more, and it makes me play better. I feel like if I've got one fixed objective, I'm too fixated. I'm just like, right, I'm just going to push everything I've got into that, and I might forget about doing other things. Whereas if I'm doing tactical, I'm always on my feet, thinking like, oh, this will do this, this will do that. And my lists that I build typically rely on my flexibility of doing these extra movement shenanigans. Yeah,
and I think that was one of the downsides of 9th was for me personally, anyways, the reality of fixed objectives is they're not as much fun.
Yeah, it's true.
I think tactical, like you said, is fun because it's more interactive, it's more engaging, and it keeps you all the reasons you just said. It keeps you on your toes, etc.
The randomness.
So all of that is it makes for a better gaming experience.
It does. Yeah.
I also think if you do take fixed, you've got to be very careful, because if you come up against a decent opponent, they will immediately know how to counter that.
Yeah.
So if you're like, right, you've
bring it down. Hammer thanks. They're gone.
Yeah, exactly that. So I think there is definitely horses for courses. There are situations and armies that you will play against where the light bulb should come on, and you go, right, my list can actually do these 2 fixed objectives really well against them.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, I think it depends on you. It does depend on your play style.
Yeah.
And if you're going tactical, you do need to think about all of those.
You do. couple of things I was going to mention as well, actually, like about like the different kind of things that you can do during the game. So, like, I mean, deep strike, for example, to score secondaries. If you've got units that do deep strike, I've written down just a couple of things. You might want to keep your deep strike units primarily for when you get like behind enemy lines, because you're gonna, it's always hard when you get that turn one when you're behind enemy lines turn one. You're like, well, what can I do? Like, my deep strike units can't even do it. My reserves can't even do it. And it's so hard. But yeah, so if you do get behind enemy lines, typically from turn 2 onwards, you want the deep striking units to be able to kind of do those ones for you. As well as capture enemy outpost. If you deep strike some Terminators, turn 2, in the back end, and you charge them in,
you can make your 9-inch charge. Happy days.
Easy peasy. It's average, right? Average roll. Everyone should make
it's
that
an average roll for you.
Yep. And then after that, infiltrate. I love, honestly, I get a little grin every single time my little flayed ones are up the board. And turn 1, I pull cleanse.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Yes.
I'm already on the objective with infiltrate. So if people don't know what infiltrate is, it allows you to basically place your units 9 inches away from enemies or their deployment zone.
It's almost like deep strike before the game starts, isn't it?
Exactly.
So like during deployment.
Exactly. I had to put my flayed ones on the objectives in the center. And then straight away, if I pull cleanse, I'm like, this is great. Easy 5 points. Easy 5 points. Along with that as well, though, area denial.
Yeah, that's another good one first. Turn 1 and scoring,
It's so hard to get it after turn 2 or 3 because once the enemy unit's there, because you've got to be wholly within, I think everyone that messes up so many people, you've got to be wholly within 6 inches or something
Your
like
unit's
that.
got to be wholly within 6 inches of the center of the board,
And the enemy unit has to be also outside of 6 inches as well. So I think everyone forgets the holy section because everyone has like big tanks or vehicles or monsters, which are big, large bases. So getting them wholly within can sometimes be a bit of a struggle.
Yes.
So
it really is. You're right.
So getting that turn 1 when you've got all your flayed ones in the middle, you're like, easy 5 points, easy 5 points. And then other than that, your reserves, I always try and keep some really cheap units in reserves, primarily just for engage on all fronts, just to be able to be like, all right, cool, pull the engage on all fronts, right? I'm in all 4 table quarters. Just make it super easy, Scarabs or Locust Destroyers, that's where they come in for me. I just push them on. They're there only to score points. And 30 points to score me 5, 10, 15
points. It's a great trade, isn't it?
Easy.
If you can spend 50, 60 points and score you 5 points, it's a very good trade.
I've put another one down there called Shenanigans. So it's not a stratagem or anything like that, but Shenanigans. And I say Shenanigans because it could be like an army rule, like Grey Knights, where you get to teleport around, or it could be the Necrons because they get the
Hypercrypt Legion.
Exactly. So basically, Shenanigans are basically just like where you're able to remove them off the board and basically place them back down.
Yes.
So the Transcendent Catan, he can choose to advance, and that means he's allowed to move around the board anywhere he wants with outside of 9 inches. But he can also shoot, which means a lot of secondaries allow him to do it.
Because you need to be able to move and then shoot. Yeah,
exactly. So doing that sort of stuff, I guess I class them as Shenanigans. It's just really good. Having those units to do it is really nice. Yeah. So that's kind of my top tips.
Yeah, there's some really good ones in there. I should be writing these down.
I'll send you the document later. You've got them for later.
The other thing I think is worth touching on briefly is detachment choice. Now, this doesn't apply to like 80% of the factions yet because they haven't got a codex. But if you're looking,
sorry about everyone out there.
If you are lucky enough to have a codex, though, make sure you pick a detachment that matches your play style. So there's no point picking a defensive gunline detachment if your play style is that you like to get in your opponent's face, is it?
I think you do have to be careful of that because, yes, people do want to change things up and they're like, I'll tell you what, I'm feeling a bit more shooty this time. So they'll pick loads of shooting units and they'll sit there and they're like, this is great. And they'll start playing and they're like, I need to move. Like in the head.
Charge!
In the head, they're like, I need to move. It's like, no, slow down, champ. You don't need to go. But they're already moving the units up. It's like, stop. It's a 48-inch range. You don't need to go any further.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's a really good shout. Like making sure that when you do pick your list, don't go in your old habits.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes, it's fine to try new things, but just be aware of that in the back of your mind that you need to change your play style if you want to do that.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is pick a detachment that gives you the tools to build a list based on the points that we've just talked about.
Yes.
Because not all detachments are equal, are they? There are some of them are not very good.
That's putting it very lightly.
Yeah, and that's across the board, apart from poor AdMech players where all of them are not very good, or most of them. So so think about that as well. Obviously, we're talking about competitive play, you know, so that could be playing against your friends where you want to compete as high as you can against each other and smash each other off the table, or it could be going to tournaments as well. If you're playing casual, ruler cool, it doesn't make none of this really matters. No. Play what you like, but if you want to play competitive, pick a detachment that suits your play style and gives you the tools to do the job.
Yeah, no, definitely. For me, it's kind of like sometimes it's quite hard to pick between, right, what's going to score me points and what's my best play style.
Yes,
because for me, like, I like to be not sneaky, but I like to get around the board and kind of jump in, jump out everywhere. So sometimes melee doesn't really suit me. Like Skullback Destroyers for Necrons, I never make them work.
Yeah,
I people, like, even when they were really good in 9th, people saying you need to bring them. They're really good. They're really cheap. They're better than Lich Guard. I agree. I just couldn't play them.
Yeah.
I was so bad with getting them in the right spots. But then when 10th came around and Lich Guard were just unreal blocks of blobs, I was really good at playing them. I was getting them in the right spots. I was zoning
you were
correctly.
experienced with them and they fitted your play style. You knew what to do with them.
Exactly. I like the resilience of them. And I think resilience is, I guess, probably a good way of describing how I like to play my units. I like to make them tough. I like to make them annoying, especially when it comes to reanimating. I was a big fan of 9th when warriors were just this endless blob of units kept on coming back. And you give them like it was like a 3-up save on top of like a 4-up invuln because of back in 9th it was like the Technomancer give them stuff.
I think the Chronomancer gave them an invuln.
Chronomancer, something like that. Yeah, and it was just like playing around that play style and then reviving them at the end of it as well. It was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. So
watching your opponent's face crumble.
The light shade faded from their eyes. Honestly, it was so good. I remember a big knight. It's like 400 points shot at a blob of 20 warriors. 1 warrior survived, and then I had to obviously roll 4-ups or something, or 5-ups.
5-ups for reanimation. Yeah,
I got so many 5s. He was very unhappy. Then at the end of that, I raised like an extra 10 because the Technomancer or whatever, was close by. That's when they didn't have to be within the unit. They were just next, like within 3 inches.
Yeah, they had to be within so many inches, and then they could help.
Yeah, I felt bad for the opponent. It was my friend Rob, but he was not happy that day, which I don't blame him. Killing 19 of them and then 18 coming back.
Yeah,
he was not happy about that.
It's classic Jack.
Yeah, but man, reanimations are unreal.
Yes.
But I guess as well, it's probably worth mentioning is sometimes people can't be like hoarders like me, or possibly like you, when it comes to actually having the units to play.
Yes, this is true.
We're talking about like, oh, you need to pick these kind of units to do this, you need to pick this kind of units to do that. Well, you might not have those units.
That's a very good point.
Sometimes, although we're talking about detachments, and although sometimes it's better to pick a detachment before you pick the unit, so it just depends on what units you have available.
Yeah.
If you don't have the units to run that kind of list, well, don't run that list. Run a list that is competitive with the units that you've got.
Very good point.
And I think it's just, again, I'm a hoarder, so I've got them all for Necrons, so that's not an issue for me. But yeah, just I would say keep that one in mind as well.
Yeah, I'm the same. My OCD doesn't allow me to not have like multiple units of everything.
Yeah. So. Well, I buy one now, and I'm like, well, I can run 3. My missus just buy 3. Well, what's the point of buying 1? But that's not what you should think. You should think legitimately and be like, oh, I'll get the 1 because I enjoy it.
Yeah, it's very true, and I think there is a you can get into a cycle of meta chasing and buying units, losing a game and like, I need these, and then you just by the time you've built and painted them, the meta's changed.
The worst thing I hear, or I dislike when I hear people lose a game, they just walk away and they're like, yeah, I need this. I'm like, no, settle down. You don't. A new unit isn't going to fix your list. Like, review what you need to do and see what the purpose is and that. But
at Warhammer Fest GT was the first one that you and me went to, and I played in the last round. I played a teenager, played a kid, and he actually nearly beat me. I only beat him by a couple of points in the 5th round, but he was so upset he got his dad to go and buy him a Bane blade.
No, you don't do that. Don't you're out there. Don't do that.
I mean, well, if you can get your dad to buy a Bane blade, probably should. Do
that. If you're not buying it,
if you're not buying
it,
get someone else to pay for it. But that was an extreme example. Yeah.
But overall, I think just finding the units that combo well with the detachment, the Hypercrypt Legion's really good to teleport round. Do you want to combo that with a unit that isn't, that's very tough and very attacky, but not very fast? I think a really good example of that is the Nightbringer. He's really strong. He's really tough. He's got actually really good OC, but his movement's only 6 inches. So to get him up the board, is a nightmare, and he's a single unit. So comboing that single unit toughness but the weak movement with the Hypercrypt Legion to teleport him and use a stratagem within 3 inches of a unit. You're already in someone's face in turn 2.
And that's, you can't charge when you go within the 3, but he has he's got shooting abilities, and he's got an ability
Gaze of Death,
where units around him take mortal wounds, don't
at
they?
the end of the fight phase.
Exactly.
But then again, since he's so tough and he's got the 4 of Invern, he's got the 4 Fire of Feel No Pain, and 12 wounds, with confidence he's not going to get killed.
He's going to tank an awful lot of firepower. You can drop him in there, and then it becomes something your opponent has to deal with there and then. And that kind of then frees up other units that may have been misplayed to allow you to then be like, right, well, I've misplayed. Right, well, this dude's here, so he's going to soak up a lot more damage. Or if they don't put a lot of damage into him, well, then he's going to absolutely tear you a new one in the back line, basically, if you don't deal with him. So that's kind of my top tip for Necron. I like it. And I think that leads us on quite nicely into what I would consider more advanced tips. And something that you touched on slightly before is synergies and wombo combos.
Yes.
So I think there are, as you get more experience with the game and your faction, there are units that you can pick that synergize well with each other, but also synergize well with enhancements and stratagems. So I was thinking an obvious one is the Necron Technomancer, and with the Canoptech, he can lead Canoptech Wraiths now.
Yes,
and that gives them a 5 up, Feel No Pain. They've already got a 4 up Invuln and 4 wounds, toughness 6.
Yep.
So they become again just another level of resilience and tankiness, which makes your opponents weep because they can't get it's hard.
Can't get through.
There are very few armies that can reliably chew through a unit of 6 Wraiths in one phase.
And I think it's 12-inch move or something like that, or 9-inch move?
10-inch, I think it is, 9 or 10,
It's so fast to get around the board as well, so already they're coming at you. So if you are going to try and shoot them, well, they're going to probably, with that movement, they're going to get into those awkward little spots to not get shot at.
Yes.
Even if they do get found, then again, that toughness, that resilience they've got, on top of the reanimation that they've got, automatically just kind of just does wonders for them.
Another one is something that you do as easily as breathing, but is more advanced for me is forward deploy. So you touched on this before, infiltrate, this ability to, like you said, basically deep strike in deployment, but also scout is the other one.
Yeah,
so
scout actually,
which is once you've deployed, you get a pre-game move, of X inches. So it's used. They were all Scout 9 to start with, but they've changed a lot of it now, haven't they? Some I think Necron Tomb Blades are only. Did you say that 5 or 6 inches now?
9, I think. Actually,
is it still 9? Is it? All right, good. I think, for example, in the Canoptic Court detachment for Necrons, the Technomancer can have an enhancement called the Dimensional Sanctum. So if you, which allows a unit to infiltrate.
Yes.
So you've now put a Technomancer in a Wraith unit to give them a 5 up Feel No Pain, and they can then do what your flayed ones do.
You can already see the one more combo kind of style coming in, which is just.
And it comes back to what we were talking about points efficiency before. Is that enhancement might be 20, 25 points or something, but for what it gives you, that makes that unit so much better.
And to not forget as well, that to add on top of that even more, if you're playing the Canoptic Court, when you basically have infiltrate units and you are holding down more objectives in the no man's land, that becomes your power matrix. So all those units that already have these buffs of more toughness, more fastness, more strongness, they've then got better shooting as well, because that's your power matrix.
You're getting all your rerolls, aren't you?
All the rolls across the board in shooting and melee. So just the wombo combos never end.
And
you've got to synergize them.
And this is where you can really get lost down rabbit holes on Reddit or on Facebook faction forums and stuff. But there's an awful lot of experienced players out there that can say to you, well, why don't you do this? And this is why you should do it, and this is what you can do with it.
Definitely.
So definitely worth starting. Once you've got the basics down, definitely start thinking about some of those synergies as well.
Yeah.
And I think the other one, again, this is something that you touched on before, but if you can put something in your list, if you've got enough points, give your opponent something to worry about. So like you just talked about the ability to drop your Nightbringer into
3 inches away from someone.
So if you've got an army rule or a detachment rule that allows you to do something funky like that, some shenanigans, then find a unit that pairs well with that can give your opponent real problems. Backlines is the main one, really, because I think naturally, as we're sat across the table from each other, we're thinking about the midboard and the opponent's side.
Yes.
I mean, obviously screen your backlines, but if you can get for me, if somebody drops something where I'm not expecting it in my back lines, or even somewhere in the midboard where I'm not expecting it, and it completely throws you. Your game plan almost has to go out the window temporarily while you deal with this threat, and that allows, as you said before, that allows you, if you can do that to your opponent, that allows you to then go, well, then, while they deal with that, I can go over here, and I can kill that and that. I can score points here. I can get on these objectives. It can change the game.
It certainly can. I mean, I've done that with games when I was versing Necrons and I was versing the Hypercrypt one, where that could teleport. Well, I knew they could teleport, and I knew they could do it fast and easy. So I was like, right, I already need to out-teleport them. So my list that I was bringing was the Annihilation Legion. So it wasn't so much of a teleporting shenanigans, but I had a few units like the Transcendent Catan who could teleport around.
Right.
So luckily I got turn 1. Oh no, actually I did get turn 2 that time. But what I'd done was, in my turn, he didn't come down as much, because obviously in his turn he has to pull them off at the end of his turn. So he didn't have the chance to get in my face. So I was like, I've got to do it here. I knew he brought off the Catan, he brought off some other melee units. I knew I could see what he was doing. It was easily written on his face. So I was like, right, I've just got to get in his face sooner. And I did. I was like, right, Transcendent Catan in the back line, my Ophidian Destroyers who can come down and then go back in. Done that. His turn as well, straight in his back line. Nice. So although he had these Catans ready to come in my back line, he could have easily just came in and started rinsing through them. But he knew if he didn't deal with mine, I was going to do the same for his.
Yes.
So he went back to fight my Catan, and I kind of knew my Catan was stronger than his Lich Guard in the back line, so I wasn't too worried.
Yeah.
He put his Catan in my back line, and I was like, you can have it. I was like, I know I can hold the mid board better than you, and I know I'm going to get yours now, and you're going to get mine, but I've still won. Effectively just swap sides.
Yes, but and you've got them, as long as you've got more than him in the middle, then you're okay.
I was absolutely golden.
That's a really good
nice
tactics. And I think that's it. Like the part of list building is an evolution. I don't think you should change your list every time you play, certainly not every time you lose, unless, I mean, there are exceptions to that. Like sometimes you can just build a trash list and like, actually none of that worked.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, as you get more experience, it's usually more about tweaking, isn't it?
Well, you've said in the past, you at least get what, like 2 or 3 games in?
I like a minimum of 3 games of the list before I change it at all, because I mean, sometimes like playing Dark Eldar, I had a Void Raven Bomber, like a flyer, and it basically won me a game against our friend Jared, and I was like, oh, this is mint. And I played it a couple more games and it didn't do very much. But the reason it did mint in Jared's game is because it made 2 6-up invuln saves on the bounce, and I was like, otherwise it just would have died and wouldn't have done very much. Yeah. So nice. You know, the dice are the dice. It is a dice game, and something you can't keep track of that all the time when you're playing. No. So you need, I think, over 3 games it kind of evens itself out usually, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
And also how you use, you know, you might, in the first time you use a unit, you might just get it wrong.
Yeah, easily.
And then so play with it another couple of times before you work out whether it deserves a place in your list or not.
I've definitely parked my my destroyers. I can't play them. The Locust Destroyers. The what's the words? The Scorpec Destroyers.
Scorpec Destroyers. I just
can't get used to them. I move them up and they get shot all the time.
They just die.
Maybe because people know that they are strong and they are good in combat. They are target them, but then. Even if I know that, I still can't get them in the right position to get them in the face.
I think they're an example of that points per model where they're not efficient because they are they've lost some of the killing power that they had in 9th.
Yes,
definitely in 9th they could kill anything. Yeah, and they've also they're not tanky enough, as you say, to survive a round of shooting. So what do they do? You know,
there's no good combos with them really anymore now. You know, the only unit that you could put with them is the Scorpec Lord.
Yes,
and all he does is give them lethal hits, which is good, but the survivability of them isn't great.
But also that's an example of an I don't know what the word is here, but it's the opposite of a synergy, because he gives them lethal hits, but the plasma sight gives them devastating wounds. Yeah. So lethal hits is 6s to hit auto wound, but then if the auto wound, you're not rolling to wound, so you're not getting as many 6s to wound to get your devastating wounds. Yeah. So there's it's one of those weird ones where even the synergy, like what's meant to synergize, doesn't work very well.
That's very true.
There's
one of the advanced tips I was going to mention as well was about like sometimes you got to kind of think, and it's a bit more of a smarter player than anything, but like when it comes to like scoring points and denying points, it's sometimes it's like, all right, well, you know, let's say there's a unit in the middle who has like what's the tempting target?
Yes.
It's like, right, I need that to get that. It's like, right, let me, I guess, push as many units into that as possible, but the opponent has specifically chosen that target to be like, right, you're going to force everything this way, but you really need to make sure that you get on the other 2 points or get in the back line.
Yeah.
So kind of, I guess, knowing what points to go for and what ones to give up on is also really, really nice. You know, sometimes you have to think, right, I'm just going to have to abandon tempting target and get rid of it at the end so that I can prep myself for the next few turns. You know, you might be within turn 3, turn 4. You know, you've got a lot of ones that require you to get to the corners or to the center. You know, if you've not pulled area denial, you might start thinking, tell you what, I'm going to start gravitating towards the middle in preparation for area denial.
Yes. We mentioned this on the video we did about a couple of weeks ago, and I think that's trying to, if you're doing tactical, trying to count your cards and plan ahead for what you haven't drawn yet. Yeah. But it's interesting, there are ways to lay traps, or you can sometimes even lay a trap for yourself if you're not careful. I watched a battle report the other week on Daily Dice, which is a great YouTube channel. Go and check it out. Some lads, other Northeast lads, but they're fantastic quality back reps. But they, the Dark Eldar player, he drew cards that required him to come out into the open in turn 1. He got turn 1, drew these cards, had to come out into the open, and he just like basically moved a lot of his stuff up. And then he was against Thousand Suns, and Thousand Suns have got a lot of mid-range firepower. And they went, you're out in the open and you're within range, and just went. And the game was done by the end of turn 1, largely because the Dark Eldar player didn't have enough resources left to score points. So in those cases, sometimes you know, you can build the best list you like, but if you sometimes you need to not try and score the points. Sometimes it's better to sacrifice those points, one turn of points, to stay in the game.
Yeah, it's very true. That's very true. I like it. Yeah. What about a list in general then, right?
Yes. So I wanted to talk to you about lists because you're better at it than I am. But you know, I think you've built some very interesting lists. And, I wanted to talk to you about your thought process. Just guide us really through how you go about it.
See, so for me, it's kind of like, I think it does depend on what I'm kind of feeling, or if I'm like, I mean, the new Necron Codex came out first of all, and I was like, you know, I've seen a lot of hate online for the Annihilation Legion.
Yes.
And I was like, why? I was like, why is everyone giving this unit or this detachment such grief? I was like, they're just not. I don't know. In my head, I was like, they're just not playing it.
Well, you and me both read the Codex and then looked online, and everyone's saying it's trash. And we read the Codex again, and we were like,
no, like
it's not great, but it's not.
It's definitely playable. Yeah. And I mean, I came 3rd in a tournament.
Yes, in a proper RTT.
RTT, and I was just like, you know what? I was like, I think I was more, I'm gonna prove them wrong kind of thing. And again, in that same tournament, there was 2 other Necron people playing the Hypercrypt one, the Cryptek one. Yeah. So both them two are the top
meant
top
to be
dogs.
the good ones. Yeah.
Well, that's
when they are good.
Yeah, and there was that one. There was the Hypercrypt one that won the LVA.
Oh yeah, won Las Vegas Open, the Hypercrypt one. Yeah.
Again, you already know how good that list is. But
he tanked 2 6-up saves in runs on his monolith as well, didn't he?
Unreal.
So funny.
Yeah, it was a shame for the Eldar player, but at the same time, it was hilarious.
Yes, but sorry, I digress. Carry on.
It's all right. But yeah, so for me, it's just like, you know, picking the list that you do enjoy. So when I seen that, everyone was giving a grief. I was like, you know what? I do want to prove them wrong that it is a good list. So I just sat there and looked at the combinations of what you can do. And I was like, right, well, it's like, what does the stratagems do? Because the Annihilation Legion's detachment rule isn't very good. It's just you get to re-roll the charge rolls.
Right.
And if the unit that you're charging is below half strength, you get an extra +1 to the dice roll. It isn't really great. You know, it's
very situational, isn't it?
Yeah, well, exactly. So for that, I was like, you know, that's not great. But what do the stratagems do? And the stratagems were not too bad. It was, again, most of them were situational, but the situations you're going to be in regarding the units that you're going to be bringing fit the bill. People are saying, oh, well, like Lich Guard, you know, they're not going to get, well, actually, it only relies on destroyers, which made me really forcefully use the destroyers or flayed ones, just to be in order to use the stratagems. But you know, it worked really well, my list, and I'll quickly go through it here that I've got here now. So when I was building this list, my main goal was like, right, how do I want to play like this game? How do I want it to unravel during it? So I've got in reserves, I've got 2 squads of Locust Destroyers. So I've got 2 squads of 6, which got 3 attacks each, basically 2 damage each, -2, hitting on 3s. 6s are lethal hits.
Yeah, this is shooting attacks, isn't it? Yeah,
it is. But I've comboed them with the 2 for Locust Lord. which basically give them criticals on +5.
So lethal's on 5s instead of 6s.
Exactly.
That's tasty, isn't it?
Exactly. But the better thing that they've got as well is they get to reroll their hit rolls if the enemy unit they are shooting at is on the objective.
Yes, I think is it reroll hit rolls of 1 all the time, and then
if
reroll
they're the closest enemy unit.
if they're the closest, sorry, and then reroll all hit rolls if they're on an objective.
Exactly. So I was like, I want the opponent to come and charge me. I want them to get onto the mid-board objective.
Yes.
To then have this absolutely punch back that they weren't expecting. I typically tell the players what my units do before the game, but they always, blood rush. They're like, I want to get this objective.
Yeah.
I'm going to run on. So I always have that waiting for them just to kind of basically punch them back, because that's what they're in reserve for. When I deploy my units, I mean, I love flayed ones. People don't really play them very much, but their infiltrate is really good to get those really early game points. Again, if you get, cleanse or to play
area denial,
and such engage on all fronts.
Yeah, there's loads, isn't there?
There's loads of points that you can get with that. So that's why I brought the flayed ones, but also it's because it entices them to charge me on the objective.
Because you're already there, and it gives your opponent a bit of anxiety or an inflated sense of urgency. Like, I've got to get them off there before he scores the points.
Exactly. And it's almost like a trap, because if I've put those flayed ones on there, now I always bring 10 in each squad, and that's because they typically will try and shoot them off first.
Mm-hmm.
So I want enough of them to survive in order for them to have to charge us. Now, again, it's almost like a trap, because when they charge, and they will kill the flayed ones, that means they are locked onto the objective. They can't go towards the nearest closest enemy.
Right, because they can't consolidate. Yes.
Yeah, and they obviously, if they're on a consolidate, they've got to go closer to the objective. So it means once they're on it, they're stuck on it, which then means when I bring in my reserves, like for my Locust Lords, they're going to get some easy picking shots on this entire unit. So whatever charges, and typically when they charge, because we always say you want the resilience, you want the tough units on the objective. So they've already probably pushed up their biggest, strongest units first to get the charge off, to ensure that they think they're gonna survive. But when you pull these two units out that just absolutely wreck, what's that, 6 times 3, whatever that is, like 18 shots or something like that. Yeah. That's a lot of shots coming at you, hitting on, or lethals on 5s.
Yes.
And then
full rerolls.
I just full reroll fish for those 5s.
Fish for 5s, yeah. Why not?
Why not? At the end of the day, exactly. Auto wounding. Because again, no matter what target it goes on, it could be a knight, it could be a tank, it could be terminators, it could just be chaff. No matter what goes on there, you're going to be taking off some wounds.
Yes, they'll do a lot of damage.
Yeah, so that's kind of, I guess that's my punch of the list. That's kind of like what they're there for. I do have some Locust heavy destroyers.
Mm-hmm.
I've got 4 of them, 2 squads of 2.
Yeah.
So those ones, again, are just for the tanks that I might come across. The trucks that might be charging, or maybe a knight or 2 that is kind of as an allied attachment, just to kind of ping them down.
Got that anti-tank punch there, yeah.
Yeah, and seeing the people's face drain when I go, that's 6 damage.
6 damage,
and
they're
like, D6? I'm like, no. 6 damage, please. Yeah, flat 6. And they're like, oh God, because most tanks are, and the reason that I always run them in 2s as well is because most tanks are 12 wounds.
Yeah.
So if I get 2 through, 1 squad could take out a tank.
Yeah, they're going to take out a light to medium tank, aren't they? Yeah.
Hitting on 3s, re-rolling 1s against vehicles.
Right.
Oh no, so that's on the wounds there, sorry. But so hitting on 3s, but if it's heavy, so if they stayed still, which most of them typically are, hitting on 2s.
Nice.
So already really nice. But then they're like the shooting capabilities I've got. The
Good.
melee, and I guess the toughness side of things, is I've got the Transcendent Catan in this list. Now, the Transcendent Catan doesn't gain a lot of benefits from this detachment or these stratagems that's involved, because this unit is primarily just to be annoying as ever. It's a small unit that can teleport around the board as and when.
Fit in those little gaps.
Fit in the little gaps and just apply the pressure elsewhere. So when I move, because my flayed ones aren't tough, so I want them to not get shot. So I'll typically put my Transcendent Catan in their backfield just to soak up that damage, so that
like we talked about before, it changes your opponent's game plan, doesn't it?
Exactly. Because
it buys your flayed ones a bit more time.
For those, because you might not get cleanse or anything like that in the first turn. You might get the second turn. If you don't get the second turn, we'll buy the third turn. My other units are already moved up the board to secure those objectives to then get them at a later point.
Good.
And as well, if people again forget the flayed ones, they do a lot of attacks. They've got like 4 attacks each, and if that unit that I'm attacking is below half strength, they then get every hit is a critical, so it's sustained. So I'm getting loads of attacks.
Just buckets of dice.
Exactly.
Class.
And they're twin linked, so I'll be then re-rolling the wound roll.
Wow.
So You got to be careful, because then again, for me, it's like I typically lose them, but if you don't lose them, they
can hurt.
They then hurt a lot. So I'm thinking that, you know, I've got the I guess the trap in the middle, entice them in. I've got the Catan to kind of take up a lot of focus. I've got 2 other units. First one is the Lich Guard. I like the toughness. You know, they're just there to basically, they've got the invulnerable shields, so they've got 4
I like them.
4 field pains. Either those are primarily just either hold my back line, depending on what kind of, if the other unit has like, I don't know, indirect fire, I typically don't put my weaker units on my back home field because they will just pepper them.
That's a very good point.
So I typically even keep them on my backfield. And you might think it's a waste, 10 Lich Guard for your backfield, but if they've got indirect, then you've got to have something tough to hold your own objective.
And capture enemy outpost is 8 points. So if you can deny your opponent scoring those, that can be a big swing.
Yeah, massive swing. So it's nice to have that. And if they don't have any indirect fire, I typically move them forward, primarily to go get area denial in the middle,
right?
Just to kind of fend them off and deny thebs and hopefully get it from me. They are tough.
Just be a pain in the backside. They're not as tough as they were in the launch. Like they were obnoxiously tough when 10th launched, but they're still pretty decent.
Exactly. And then again, the last kind of units I've got is the Ophidian Destroyers. I've got 3 units.
I love these. Yeah.
So good. So
they're so. I mean, they are an underrated unit. I think.
I brought them to the tournament. Everyone's like, "What are those?" Like, no one. Everyone's like, "I've never seen them before." And it's like, yeah, these guys are just like these again. Teleport around the board. So they're not. They are tough. The first charge that they do, they get like devastating wounds. So they can be really good in combat, but only once. Kind of thing. And to be fair, I don't really actually use them for combat. Again, I've got 3 of those units, and they've got an ability called Tunneling Horrors that allow you to basically take them off the board and then bring them back later on.
This for me is like, there's a lot of talk like they're 100 points for 3, and there's a lot of talk like, oh, they're quite expensive and that. And I suppose you could argue they are, but that ability to come off the board and back on in this edition for point scoring, for all the reasons we've just talked about, it's worth it, isn't it?
Absolutely,
it is worth it.
Because again, they're fast, they're easy to get around, and again, those 3 units can literally get me every secondary objective that I need.
Yes.
You know, I got area denial before them in the last tournament because we played the game mode where the middle objective goes away. So the opponent didn't put anything towards the middle.
Yes.
So when it came to my turn, I pulled area denial. I was like, all right, they're now in the middle. It's like I've scored it easy. There's no contest. There's no contest against it, and I kept them safe, and it was very nice.
They are quite choppy boys as well. They suffer a little bit like Scorp. I mean, they're not designed to do the same thing as Scorpex. They're more for like lighter infantry, but they can do something as well as score your points, can't they?
It's really good because when you get them in combat again with this detachment, I get to reroll my charge rolls. So very handy get with flayed ones because I want my flayed ones in. I don't want them caught out in the open. Very similar to these guys. I want them in combat. But even when they're in combat, I typically put the flayed ones and the Ophidian Destroyers against chaff units.
Yes.
Now, the good thing about chaff units is that they typically want to pull them back. But there's a very nice stratagem that I can use to basically then be like, right, well, if you're going to pull back, you're below half strength, right? I roll a dice roll and you might suffer D3 mortal wounds.
Right,
and it's just with chaff, they're typically 1 wound a pop.
Yeah. So you're going to chew through a few more.
Going to get a few more, a few more. And they've also got a very nice stratagem called Mask of Death. Basically just it's 1 hard hit.
Across
the board.
Yes.
The only ones that don't benefit from that is the Lich Guard and the Catan, but the rest of them,
it's destroys and flayed ones, isn't it?
Exactly, destroy it. Yeah, spot on.
So that's very true. So there is some synergies with some of the stratagems. But I love how you've explained that in terms of how that list fits together, because that is a brilliant example of the thought process of list building.
Yeah, it's just a well-rounded list. I've got units that are able to get me points easily without having to run miles to get them. I've got the punch there. I've also got like a semi-trap there that people don't really kind of expect.
Yes.
And again, I've just got the just annoying character. The Transcendent Catan is like, what, 275 points? On paper, it's quite a lot of points, but for the annoyingness that he's going to cause, the
disruption to your opponent's game plan is what makes him valuable.
Definitely.
And the fact that it's almost impossible to take him out in 1 turn as well, isn't it?
They
have to get super lucky.
At least 2 turns, if not 3. Yeah, definitely. But that's kind of like the list I've got.
I think I like the idea of laying traps, and something like Ophidian Destroyers is really interesting. And I think even against experienced tournament players, bringing something different like that, if you know how to use it properly. There was a guy who's really helpful on the competitive Necrons 40k group on Facebook called Ulyss. Sorry if I've mispronounced that, Ulyss, but Ulyss Sanders. He's a good player, plays at a high level in the States. And in 9th, everybody was taking the OBSEC detachment where we got OBSEC Dynasty, where we got objective secured on and 6-inch pre-game move. Yeah. And he was like, he's going to some big tournaments, and he was like, no, I'm taking the Novok detachment, which is the like the equivalent of the Annihilation Legion now, and 3 blocks of 20 flayed ones. And was just people like, well, what do I do about these flayed? And by the time they'd worked out, the flayed ones have already hit them and you're dead. Do you know what I mean? And something like that, if you've got models in your collection which are not necessarily considered fashionable, but you can make them work, that can give you an edge.
No, I miss the days where I can bring 40 flayed ones.
Oh no, I've got
more like 60. I've got 40.
And
now I'm limited to 10 per unit.
It's 30s max now, isn't it?
I'll spare 10 of them at once. I've
got 40 as well, but there's 10 of them are still on the sprue, and I'm like, let's just see if it changes in 11.
Not fun to build.
No, super
keep them back. Keep them
super
back.
fiddly. But thank you very much for that. I hope you guys at home found that useful, particularly the last section there where Jack's talked us through a list. I certainly did. And let us know. The only other thing I could think of just off the top of my head there that we didn't talk about was trading units. We've covered that in another video though, but something to think about is also perhaps some of those smaller units that will hold an objective and your opponent therefore has to deal with them. But you don't lose a lot of points out of that exchange. But other than that, if there's anything else we missed, always let us know in the comments. Share some of your good lists as well. We'd love to see them. Obviously we're both Necron players, but we'd love to see anybody's lists. So if you've had a success with something that's slightly different, let us know. We'd love to hear it.